Today, we're going to talk about a controversial way to handle chronic pain: pot. Or medical marijuana. Well, they're basically the same, but they're different for different reasons. But let's discuss that. When we think of pot, we tend to think of people that are stoners, right? We tend to think of someone that just wants to have a good time or isn't going to accomplish anything in life, or 420 rolls around and it's time to get high. But that's not what it's about with medical marijuana. Let me back up here. I never experimented with drugs as a teenager or a young adult. It just wasn't part of my life. I wanted to be God honoring in my decisions, and I just couldn't square getting high with being God honoring. I also saw the really ugly side of addiction and drugs. I had a family member that made some really poor life decisions, and the drug addiction got the best of them, and it was just really ugly for a really long time, and I watched it literally ruin their life. And so I just wasn't interested in drugs at all. It wasn't something that I was very well acquainted with, and I certainly didn't know the medical application of stuff. Fast forward a few years to grad school, and I had a professor that was actively dying of breast cancer. She became a friend, and eventually she even became a colleague. I worked with her some, but we were also neighbors. And as she was struggling more and more with her breast cancer, as the metastases were growing, she was in a really good deal of pain. And one of the only ways that she could find relief was through medical marijuana. And I knew that she was in her backyard smoking, because our backyards butted up next to each other, and you could smell it. And it's never struck me as wrong or having a problem. I was really genuinely happy that she found something that gave her some quality of life. Well, fast forward a few more years and get to my story. Chemo was really hard for me. And one of the many times I was at the ER, we were sitting there, and one of the ER doctors walked in, and he said, have you ever tried pot? He's like, I can't officially recommend it, but I think it might help with a lot of your symptoms that you have, a lot of the pain that you have, a lot of the nausea that you have. And truth be told, I didn't think a whole lot about it right then. But as stuff progressed with me and pain has become more part of my daily life, I revisited that idea. And I talked with my oncologist, and he was of the mindset that, hey, if it helps, do it. I talked with another one of my doctors that was like, absolutely not, don't touch this stuff. Well, that's a tough place for a patient, and there's really just mixed feelings in the medical community about medical marijuana. You know, for some people, it still carries that stigma of it's just a drug to get high with. Other people really have embraced the ideas that there's a lot of good things that marijuana can do for someone, helping with a variety of illnesses and ailments. And more of that's coming out. But you certainly still have some doctors that sit of the mindset that it's not something to be messed with. So as a patient, that's tough, because you got to decide what you're going to do. I went ahead and applied for my medical marijuana card. So through the state of Illinois, I now have my medical marijuana card that I can go to a dispensary and get marijuana, basically. Now, the more I've gotten into this, there is just so much that I don't know. There are umpteen different ways that they make marijuana into something that you can take, whether you're going to smoke it, whether you're going to eat it, whether you're going to vape it, whether you get an oil. It's all very different in the ways that they help or don't help. It's confusing at best, and it's not like when you would just get a prescription, okay? I have another prescription for pain, Norco. Norco is a narcotic, but I know how much to take, I know what I'm supposed to take, and I know how quickly it helps me. With medical marijuana, it's a little bit more of a crapshoot. In fact, the first time that I went to the dispensary was a little bit of a trip, no pun intended, for me. So I sat down, because you have to have like a consultation with someone when you're there for medical marijuana. And her first question to me was, let's see if I can do this. Her first question to me was, are you here to deal with the problems from cancer, the symptoms of cancer, or are you here to cure cancer? I was a little flabbergasted. I Nope. Haven't met anyone that says that marijuana cures cancer. And well, I have been approached by different people with some non-traditional ideas on how to take care of cancer. I'm not putting my life in the hands of marijuana. So I told her, I was like, well, tell you what, let's start with the symptoms and maybe we'll work on curing my cancer later on. I have to just be just incredibly honest here. I don't think that marijuana cures cancer. Anyway, she was very helpful in kind of teaching me about different strains, about if I wanted CBD or THC, which the THC is the controversial one, right? THC is the one that you can get high off of. But having THC combined with CBD can really help with pain. And so we talked for a long time, and I just categorically refuse to smoke. I keep joking that it's going to give me lung cancer if I do, but I hate the smell of pot. I don't want to smoke around my kids. I don't want it in my house. So I opted for something else. I went for an edible. All right, they look like fruit chews. They taste pretty much like fruit chews. You might get a little bit of a weird taste in there with it. But my issue right now with currently kind of experimenting with what would be helpful with pain is that when I take medical marijuana as something that you have to eat as an edible, it has to go through your digestive system. So that can take upwards of like an hour and a half to 2 hours before you get any of that pain relief effect from it. Whereas if I take Norco, a narcotic, I know that I have about 20 minutes before that kicks in and I can actually feel relief. So for me at this point, medical marijuana hasn't really benefited me a whole lot. I haven't found what necessarily works for me. And again, it's a little harder than just a normal prescription because there's so many different things to take. It's not regulated the same way. And I think to some degree, we're still kind of understanding what medical marijuana can do. However, here's the thing. I think marijuana gets such a bad rap because it gets abused, right? Because some people really do use it to sit around and be high all the time. But medical marijuana should be part of a conversation for someone with continuous pain because it's not about getting high, it's about finding quality of life and pain relief. You know, we get people with pain all the time get prescriptions all the time for stuff like Norco, or I'm also on gabapentin, I'm on trazodone, I'm on all sorts of different things to handle the pain. But too often we have this other alternative here that we just don't want to look at because many years ago we decided it just was a drug to get high and not something to be explored medically. I think medical marijuana is incredibly important for people to know about, for people to see if it helps with their quality of life, but not to be abused, right? But I would say the same thing about any prescription you get from your doctor. I have a ton of Norco sitting in my bathroom right now, but if I go take 50 of them, then I'm abusing that drug and I'm not using it right. So I'm a big advocate for people that need help with pain relief or other ailments in their life being able to access something like marijuana because there's a lot of good medicinal uses for it there. And if your doctor says he's not interested in it, then talk with a different doctor because I've gotten, like I said, such mixed reviews from doctors on what I should or shouldn't do with it. And it's really just kind of been like my own exploration with it. Which I'll say this, I think the Cancer Center is super cool with this. They don't particularly care if I use medical marijuana. I just have to tell them what I'm doing to make sure that it doesn't interfere with any other meds that I'm on or any treatments that I'm getting. So I guess all this is to say, if you have some ailment in your life and you need other help than what you're being prescribed, medical marijuana should be an option because it can be really helpful. But use it wisely, just like any other drug. So maybe it shouldn't have such a stigma it does, but if it can be helpful, I vote give it a try and see what's out there. Because quality of life is really important. And if something can help quality of life be better, then it's probably something to be explored.